Good morning and welcome to SCLO Consulting Live with me, Martin Crowson. I'm joined, as always, by the Managing Director of SCLO Consulting, Steve O'Hare. Morning, Steve.
Morning, Martin. How are you today?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. The sun is nearly shining. It's Friday. And
there's a football match on Sunday.
Yeah, there's football's going all right. Rugby's going well. The world is starting to open up. I've been double jabbed, so I can go to anywhere that wants to let me in. So it's all good. So life is returning somewhat to a little bit more what feels like normality.
I was feeling a bit lethargic this morning, and now you've got me pumped, so it's great.
There you go.
To have you on board.
All part of the service.
Let's get back to what we're supposed to be talking about today, and that is the title of today's chat is finding tenders that are right for your company. So a very, very wide cross-section of discussions for today. And I guess a good place to start is why is it so important to get this right before you actually start bidding for tenders?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to that. So ultimately, you've got to identify something that fits completely right with your business strategy, and all of those things. So if we take sort of like the last point first, ultimately, you don't want to win a contract that you can't deliver. And you can bid for anything. You can go and tender for stuff and do that whole process. But ultimately, you've got to be able to deliver the contract that you're going to win, because ultimately that buyer has money, they want to tender for something, they're going to be wanting to buy stuff in the future. So it's about identifying that right thing for your business. So if you win something, you can't deliver it, you end up handing the contract back, that's bad for your business. That's not good for your business. It damages your reputation, and ultimately sullies a relationship with that specific buyer. And buyers are a little bit like elephants, and they've got long memories, and they tend to remember where they've been let down in the past. We then go back to actually almost like the immediate pressing part of it is that what we've got to bear in mind that tenders come in all different shapes and sizes. So some tenders are quite short and sharp and quick to do. Others are very time consuming. And if you're bidding for something that's ultimately a little bit of a punt, or something that you can only do a proportion of something that you're in danger of winning, or you can't actually deliver fully, then ultimately you're spending an awful lot of time bidding for things that, is that constructive use of your time? Are you actually really tendering for that, or are you essentially just filling in a form that is just going to sit and not actually go anywhere, that in your heart of hearts that perhaps it isn't the best thing for you and your business to be doing at that stage?
Yeah. What about companies that start to and ah about that, Steve? So they're convinced they're 75, 80% of the way to fulfilling a potential tender, and ahhing on the last 20%. Is that a case of there's something they should go for? They should seek advice, or they should stay away unless they're 100% certain they can deliver?
I think it depends on what that 20% is, I guess. It's how far removed is it from what they actually do on a daily basis. So is it a bit of a stretch, and actually it will take their business to the next level, and actually something that is in a longer term plan to diversify and offer that bit, and try and offer something slightly different and stretch themselves in that way. Because if ultimately if businesses don't do that, they're going to be stuck in doing the same thing all the time, which might be right for some people, but others it won't be. If that 20% ultimately makes the thing fall over, and it becomes a real fundamental part of the whole process, then maybe that's where the consideration is that that's perhaps a no bid for them. I guess it's a little bit of a not a vague answer. It literally is horses for courses. It's what is that bit that isn't quite 100% right for that organisation at that time.
Mm-hmm. You spoke there about the difficulties an organisation would have if they're not physically able to fulfil a tender, but it's interesting the stuff you talk about the damage it does to their business and their reputation as well. Tell us a little bit about that, and maybe some examples, obviously without naming names, of where people have gone wrong and the possible effects that can have on their business later further down the line.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I worked before I set up SCLO Consulting. I worked for a number of large providers, a couple of large providers in the education training market. And ultimately, some of those organisations were owned by venture capitalist organisations that looked at the top line and the bottom line, and they weren't really bothered at how I actually got to that part in between. And you get with that, it tends to drive behaviours that are perhaps not the wisest for a long-term strategy. It's a here now gone tomorrow type approach. So I in my past history, I was told that we needed to go for certain things that I didn't agree with.
Okay.
And, there's a number of of things that were gone for in that market where actually you couldn't deliver it, or it was too far removed, but actually it felt, well, it's a really big stretch, but we really would like the revenue. And if you're looking purely at revenue for something, I don't think that's ever a way to go and do that. And ultimately, what did that do to that organisation? Well, bid for stuff, won stuff, handed it back, then wanted to try and bid for it again with that organisation, didn't get it. Funny enough, it's not
no chance.
It's not rocket science. If you're going to bid for something, this is you putting yourself out there. You wouldn't, if you were as a consumer, if you put yourself in a consumer's footsteps, if someone commits to doing something for you and you've asked them to do something for you and you're going to pay them for it, then they don't deliver on it, do you go back to that business again? No, you vote with your feet. Absolutely. Because there are other organisations out there, and bids and tenders are exactly the same thing. You've got to get it right to start with. You've got to make sure that you can, ultimately you think about your winnability and your desirability and your deliverability. You've got to make sure that you tick all those boxes before you start. Okay,
you've been advising companies for decades now on these sort of things and whether to go ahead for.
Yeah, go on.
For a long while on whether to go ahead for tenders and then to get involved in tenders, whether to proceed with a potential application. If a company engaged you and you really didn't think it was for them, would you, as part of the SCLO service, would you tell them that?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the core values of SCLO is actually, if you can't win it and you can't deliver it, I don't want your money. It's I don't want to bid for something that ultimately leads to somebody failing. Interestingly, I had a conversation with a customer earlier this week. There was an opportunity that's come up from the West Midlands Combined Authority that is sort of 50-60% in their sweet spot. And they're quite keen in getting involved, but from leading a tender perspective, it's not for them. The middle bit of it is they're brilliant at, absolutely stellar at, but the contract has a wrap around it, and they can't do the wraparound part of it, and they don't want to do the wraparound part of it. So yes, it's a nice number with 7 figures in it. And would be worth them, if you were purely looking at it from a revenue perspective, they would be of interest. However, they've got no desire to do the front end bit and no desire to do the back end bit of this pier. They want to do the bit in the middle. So from their perspective, they've got to look at a partnership approach and work with other organisations who could perhaps do the whole thing, and they could be part of that solution. They could be part of a supply chain for that organisation. So they've got to adapt their approach to that opportunity. And we had an honest conversation, and I think we both agreed that it's not really for them.
What factors should companies truly focus their thoughts on when they're deciding whether to go ahead with this or not? What areas would you advise people to look into and to enable them to know themselves whether it's right to go ahead with the bid?
Yeah, so there's 2, 3, 4 things that you can look at, and there's different theories and models and that people utilize when they make these processes. So the key thing I'd always, if people are new to tendering and they're new to that sort of stuff, is to look at things like a bid no bid model, where actually you set parameters around the different things that are right for your business. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can do almost like a data-driven piece, or you can do a sort of like a more intuitive thought process that goes behind it. So if you're looking at things that are data, you look at physical geography, you look at contract value, you look at target audience, you look at company that you're working with, you can look at duration of the contract, you can look at fees that are attached to the contract. So you can start to score whether you get the right score in those areas. So actually, if it's like a £1 million plus, you score 10. If it's less than £100,000,
okay.
So so you can start to build up a bit of a picture there, and that's a nice, that's a good way of doing things, because it's very data driven and takes any sort of emotion out of it. By the same token, you've also got almost like and it's not fluffy. It's almost like a thought. It's like a thought leadership almost type thing of how you do it. So actually, it's like desirability of the contract. So which is kind of like the data thing, but it's actually that how desirable is it to do? How, in your perspective, how winnable is it? And that's almost like thinking about how many competitors you've got in that specific market. What's your service offer against what the buyer is wanting to buy, and I touched on this again, the deliverability. Can you actually deliver it? But then if you're looking at the data-driven one, who's your target audience, what's the geography, how much is it? It kind of gets you to the same place. It's just getting you to a different place in a slightly different way. It's a bit like what trainers is it Nike or Adidas, and it gets you the same thing. It's just doing it in a slightly different way.
I suppose with any business, data always helps make decisions, but there's got to be a level of gut feeling and intuition involved in making decisions, hasn't there? You know your business better than anyone else in theory. Yeah,
absolutely. And I would always advise people to do a bit of both, because one or the other it's never quite the same. And I like data and I like stats, but sometimes it's the gut feel that knows that it will take you there. It will be. Data doesn't tell you everything. It tells you a lot, but it doesn't tell you everything. It sort of backs up your gut feel sometimes.
Sure. So where should companies look for these opportunities, Steve?
So there's a raft and range of different sites. Obviously, we're going through a Brexit transition at the minute. So a lot of things, the bigger contracts, and particularly governmental-based contracts, used to be on something called the OJU, which is the official journal of the European Union. That's something that started to be drawn back. So key sort of big governmental type stuff. If we look at things like Contracts Finder, which was always about before, so that's got a lot of contracts on there. But UK government have shifted onto a new system called Finder Tender. So it looks exactly the same as Contracts Finder, but it's Finder Tender, and this is all about that's taking the role of what the OJU used to do. So if you're ever looking for stuff that's in any particular sector, then these are the sites to go look at. And I'll give you a really good example. Recently, my computer, bless it, needed a few little bits of updates. We're doing things like this. We're killing the memory and killing the RAM in the system. So I had to get more RAM, which was something I never thought I'd ever need to buy in life. But there you go. So
could you find any? That's the key.
I did. I found a man who could tell me about it and told me what it was in English, which was great. So local provider. So went down to a shop in Leicester, SME. Finds out this guy's got two businesses. So he's got his computer repair stuff and all of that lot, and service was great. But also what he's got is a renewable energy business. So his renewables, he's got contracts with Hitachi and all these companies, Siemens or whoever, who build these posh things. That it's all about energy recovery, energy restoration, and energy type stuff. And funnily enough, the biggest contracts are governmental driven. That's where the monies are. So he wanted to start to look at those. So actually, he did me a little bit of a favour on doing something for nothing. So I gave him a bit of free consultancy as to where to find opportunities. So we had a quick sit down and use those services to find all the different contracts that are out there, and there was a massive raft and range of these things. So for him as almost like a new market entrant who's got really good supply relationships, for him to find out who's got what contract, to then be able to use that as a sales tool to then go and almost do that partnership approach that we talked about. So they're maybe not ready to run a big contract, but they can definitely do the bit in the middle. to start having conversations with others as to how they can start to get into the market and start to sort of try. So, you know, they're really useful tools to use.
Okay. In summary, Steve, I guess like any business-driven process, it's a case of learning from mistakes, but also learning from successes in terms of bidding for tenders. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, with any sort of process that you have, you know, either you do the data one or the gut feel one, you know, it's about reviewing that, and it's always about, when you look at a process, is, you know, every period, and that period will be dependent on after you bid. So, you know, it's starting to look at, you know, every time you bid, start to review what your process said. Do you need to adjust your parameters? Do you need to change what you consider is desirable? Do you need to think about that and evolve that process as you go? So making sure that you've got, you know, up-to-date information, you're doing up-to-date things, you're providing the you know, you're getting the key thing that you want to have within your business. And ultimately, you're winning contracts that you can deliver, and it helps your business grow.
Yeah, and just finally, Steve, has the current economic situation made it a busy time for tenders? You spoke about Brexit there. I guess there's lots of, you know, to the uninitiated, there's lots of changes going on at the moment. Is it particularly busy?
It's busy enough, you know. I think what we'll find is, you know, there will be a lot of regeneration activity, regeneration type stuff, and there's a lot of big infrastructure projects going on in the UK at the minute. The level of spend will continue. You know, we've had an economic shunt, and you can't tighten your belt during that time. You've got to spend you've got to speculate to accumulate, and the government are doing that. So, you know, you look at Mr. Sunak's last budget, and that's what it was. You know, it's a speculate to accumulate period. So, you know, there is always business, there is always tenders, and it's just it's different times in the market. So in the minute, it's not the right time. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for your time this morning. Thanks for joining us, folks. As ever, you can catch up with, find out more information about the business on our website. If you enjoyed today's broadcast, there's plenty more broadcasts we've done, which you can find on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell there, and you'll find out when we're going live again soon, which I'm sure we will be. Until then, thanks a lot for joining us today from myself and Steve. Once again, thanks for your time. Nice to see you again. Pleasure. Thank you, Martin. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, Andrew, we'll catch up soon. Thanks a lot for joining us, folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.